Hey guys, so thanks for sending me this game. I'm excited to review it. We had a very exciting game here, and I think there were sort of two main points. So one was with this fight in the lower left, where this black group got pretty weak, but maybe not as weak as both players thought, and black ended up burning a couple unnecessary moves here that let white take the lead. And then the other thing I want to go over in this review is some Tanukis away from Joseki that I think let white get sort of a suboptimal result. So we had this situation right here where white played this push at e6, trying to get black to respond in Sente, and black did and ended up playing this move right here to make sure he was alive. And so white was able to take this point here at g15, which is just so big and kind of locked up the game for white. But was this a4 move really necessary? I actually don't think so. So if black had instead played, for example, this shoulder hit here, or even, let's say, this pincer, but I think even this shoulder hit would probably be enough, I don't think there's any way for white to kill this group down here. So even if white tries a move like this, black can easily make a living shape, just simply like this, and no matter what move white plays, white isn't going to be able to make a bulky 5 shape because black will just play here, and we can see that even after this push, the group is going to be totally alive. So unfortunately, these gote moves cost black the game, and let's see how we got here. So we'll go back to the beginning. Okay, so we had sort of an exciting opening where white played this approach and then this pincer, which I like. It's a dynamic way to play. Black took the corner and white blocked the correct way here. But after black pushed, white actually tanuki'd to the upper right. So I don't think this tanuki away from this joseki is a good idea. There's sometimes when it's okay to tanuki away from a joseki, but any situation like this where you have these two stones kind of like neck to neck is just so urgent. Whoever gets the first hane has a huge advantage. So unless there's something very urgent somewhere else on the board, I don't recommend tanukiing away from this, and this approach just isn't that urgent. So instead of this tanuki, I think white should have just continued with the joseki, and we could have had a normal result here, and maybe now, if white wanted to tanuki and play here, I think that's totally fine. But this would be much better than tanukiing just away from these two stones. So after this, black wisely haned here, which is a perfect way to take advantage of white's tanuki. So white was forced to kind of fall back here. But then instead of wedging like this, I think black should have just haned underneath. This is good enough. So after this sequence, black already has a great result here because there's no cut at c5. So black can then be satisfied going back to the upper right or playing wherever and knowing that white's stones are a little over-concentrated and black took the entire corner. But after this, black didn't get quite as good a result as possible. So this kick I'm also not crazy about. It's definitely playable, but I think of the kick as more of a sort of special use move that's really only optimal if you already have a stone somewhere here. The reason being that then white doesn't really have room to make a full extension. And so we don't mind that we strengthened white because we have this pincer stone. And I think I mentioned in one of the other reviews that since AlphaGo, we have seen these kicks played more often, so they're certainly possible. But I at least find it hard to imitate the AI in this way and still like to think of it as kind of a special use move. And so white again chose to tanuki away from a sort of joseki. This one I think is more playable than the one in the lower left. But I don't think this C11 move is the best one. I see a lot of Q players playing these sort of wide extensions, and I have a hard time sort of seeing the value of them just because they leave the corners so open. And to me, it seems very painful to play a sort of wide enclosure and still leave the corner open like this. So if you're going to tanuki, I would prefer just to play a normal enclosure like this. I know we all know this, but the corners are just so big, and they really are bigger than the sides, except for special situations. So even this Ogema here, I think, puts some good pressure on the corner, as white wants to do. But if it were me, I would probably just extend here, because this corner isn't so urgent, and black's follow-up here is very big and painful. Like, it just works perfectly with these stones in the lower left, and so I would try to prevent this as white. And actually, if I were black, I think I would pincer even closer, like something like this. The reason being that after this sequence, white can still make a decent extension here. It maybe isn't quite as wide as white would prefer, but it still is pretty good. Whereas if black played like this, then there's no way for white to make any kind of extension here. White is forced to, play something like this or like this, and I think that's a good way to put more pressure on white. Yeah, so if I were white, I would probably make a base here aside from jumping, but it's hard to say. Yeah, so this push is this Atari is a nice thick move for white, for black. I think white really owes a capture here. It's certainly reverse sente, the reason being that afterwards, if black, instead of invading here, were to just capture, this is something very close to sente, because if white tanukis again, there's this very big ko here, which is something close to a picnic ko for black, I would say, and this is threatening to take a huge, huge chunk of territory. So I would just capture as white, and as black, I would follow through. Or, yeah, I would follow through here. But this invasion is still a good move, so then white does add the move here. This is good. Yeah, this Kama is interesting. Like, if it were me, I would probably just play this simple jump, but I think the Kama is possible. Probably better not to play this Hane here. It's usually a bad exchange unless there's a special reason for black to play it. And instead of this push here, I would prefer to play just some big move, like this 3-3 is still very open, or probably most importantly, just pushing out here, because you really don't want white to get a chance to play something like this. It will be very painful for black. So we got a fight here. I think both players played this well in the beginning. But after this, we saw another tanuki from white, so I can tell that white really likes to tanuki. But this situation is similar to the lower left one, where when you have 2 or 3 stones like this, allowing this hane on the head of 3 stones is just too painful to allow. Especially 3 stones like this in the center of the board. This should really just sort of hurt you in your gut. So I would really only tanuki away from a situation like this if there was something super urgent somewhere else. Like maybe if this was a ko threat and the ko is really big, or white had a really big sente move or something like this. But although this p7 move is nice, I don't think it's enough. And black should definitely follow up with his hane on the head of 3 stones. This just kind of radiates power through the center of the board. But black descended here. And so then after this, so white has another chance to add the extra move here. But instead of this Kama, if white's going to play in this area, I think I prefer just to jump down. Simply because this Kama just leaves this push and cut, as we saw later. So it kind of actually doesn't put as much pressure on black as the jump, even though it kind of looks like it puts more pressure. So black got some nice sente moves and then pushed and cut here, which looks pretty good. So white played a nice move here at r9. This move is very sharp. I think a lot of Q players might have just descended here, and played something like this. But this push here, or this bump, is a great way because it threatens these black stones and it puts more pressure on this black stone here. And this hane on top is a good follow-up. But after here, I think white backed down a bit too much. I would actually just extend here. So this move seems good to me, and it's threatening to cut off these black stones, and these 2 stones are reaching out to white's other friends here. So I think this would be a nice follow-up. Yeah, and so black played very well to play this Hane and kind of take advantage. But I think playing back to connect is a little bit too early. Black kind of back down here, and I don't think it's necessary. So what if black just extends? I think maybe black was worried about white trying to cut black off here, but it isn't really that much of a problem. Black can pretty easily negotiate his way out of this, especially because these white stones are still pretty thin at the top. So this seems fine to me. So white did finally add a move here, so black missed the chance to Hane up at top. White took the stone in the center. This is just a small thing. If it were me, I would probably just play this hanging connection here, this tiger's mouth. This peep isn't really that big of a deal. It doesn't get white that much. And this just leaves like a little bit more Aji than I'd be comfortable with personally. This is a good sequence for white to kind of put pressure on this black group, but it does lose Sente. And I know I keep saying this a million times, but these corners are just so big. So even though this peep and kind of seal in here are very big, like, I would just take the corner. Maybe it feels like sort of unimaginative, but it's just so big. And so here we have another Tanuki from white. And so, again, I just don't think this one is a good idea. Like, the difference between this and this is just so big. And there's no reason for white to allow this to happen, especially because white can probably wrangle Sente out of this situation anyway. And this Hane here isn't Sente. So I would say black should definitely just ignore it and play here. I'm not really sure what white's follow-up would be. Like, capturing this stone in Gote is not very big, and black can easily like make life here with a decent number of points. So I think black missed an opportunity to Tanuki, but white played another Gote move here, and then black was definitely right to ignore it and play here. So black got a big advantage in this left corner. And again, this Hane at the head of two stones, it's actually sort of similar to the shape that we ended up in the lower left, and it just shows the damage that a Tanuki can bring. Yes, and this extension here is also a very strong move. But after this, I don't think this descent here at C18 is too big. I understand that black played it to kind of lock down this corner territory, but I think just fixing this cut here would be a lot better. You know, this sort of thing is really just endgame, and these white stones are don't have such a strong shape, and this kind of puts some pressure on these two white stones here. So I think this would be the better move. So white did play some good follow-ups here on this black group in the corner. And this move is very good too. This kind of punishes black for descending at C18 instead of playing the Kama over here. And so black didn't actually end up with that many points here because of this descent instead of playing over here. And white got to be very safe over there. So now white started to attack this black group, which is fine, but I think black got a little spooked into playing some Gote moves, like I mentioned earlier. So black might feel that, like, oh no, like I'm getting attacked so much here. But actually, white has already played like a bunch of moves here. So I guess white got the Hane and Connect. But this is actually the second move because white already played this and black Tanuki'd away. So I think it's okay for black not to get too many points here. And if we look around at the board, black actually has basically all four corners. And white's territory at the top is still pretty open. So I would feel pretty good as black if black can manage to get Sente here. So this is all fine, but oh, there it is. So here we have our first sort of Gote move here. And so black really needs to take Sente to play somewhere else. And I think the biggest moves, or the biggest area, is definitely over here, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the review. So I think just this pincer looks good to me. I'm not quite sure how white would handle this. I guess the Kosumi here, but black can pretty easily push up like this. And remember that even though white got this nice attack, attack in here, there still is this cutting point here at the triangle point that white is going to have to watch out for later. And if black gets a chance to play something like this hanging connection, this is actually going to threaten to cut here. So this looks pretty strong to me. If that feels a little bit too aggressive, this shoulder head, I think, is probably enough for black. Just something like this. And if white is kind enough to respond here, it's sort of the same thing, where we still have this cutting point here threatening to cut the Kema off. And remember, these white stones at the bottom, or sorry, at the upper right, are still pretty thin. So this looks like a pretty exciting way for black to play, I think. But where were we? But black, unfortunately for black, backed off here. So white kind of got away with bullying this black group a bit. Pushed out. Oh, right, and then here we have the second Gote move, and I think this one was just too much for black to recover from. So just like I was going over from the beginning, if black just simply Tanukis away, there's no way for white to kill this group. So black's totally alive. And getting this H16 or pincer at J17 could really mean the difference here. So after this, white played a very big move here at G15. I think that is the biggest move on the board. And so the game is definitely in white's favor now. I think black realized that he needed to try some kind of invasion, so this looks like a good start. We had a bit of a complicated fight here. And I think black's last chance is maybe right around here. So this is maybe seems like a small point, but I think the problem is the type of connection here. So connecting here leaves, as we see here, some bad Aji at the H13 point because this H13 cut becomes an Atari. And so black had to come back and connect here. So if instead black had played this connection, I think black would have had a better chance because then black would not have had to come back and connect here. So at this point, black could either try to threaten here, and if white connects, capture the stone, or even if, to go back to the move, if black just tries to push these stones out like this, this H13 move is no longer an Atari. So this will be a much better fight for black. So I think that is kind of black's last chance. And after that, white just had too big of a lead that just got bigger as the game went on. So yeah, in total, I think black played a few too many Gote moves with his bottom left group, and maybe in the upper left didn't take quite enough advantage of the free move that he got there. White showed a lot of courage in playing all these Tanukis, but I would encourage him to be a little bit more careful with Tanukiing away from these very urgent Joseki variations. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope to see some more of your games in the future. I hope you enjoy.